I'm using the microphone today because this room is so echoey. I'm hoping this will be a little bit better. And I'm testing out the synchronization in Final Cut Pro. We're going to have a serious talk today. Um, we're going to talk a little bit about death before I go into the normal Tedium Unlimited events. So I'm actually recording this after the events you're going to see following. I'm going to tell you a story. I want to tell you my story. And I don't know how much of it I'm going to leave in because I just don't know how it's going to come off. As they say, it's about death. It's been with me my entire life. As I'm sure it is everyone. That's probably a little bit pompous sounding, but that's not what I meant. So my father and my mother were, for the time, a pretty typical family. Husband, wife, mortgage. He had a job, she kept house. And just prior to my third birthday, my mother was killed. I've probably said this before. I don't remember my mother at all. At all. But I can remember being in first grade and someone asking me, "Well, what do you remember about your mother?" And even then, my answer was nothing at all. She is, to me, my entire life, like a stranger I have never met. But it doesn't mean that it hasn't left a hole that you know is there, but you don't know what its shape is like. You don't know what it's like. But I have been aware of my entire life that the course of my life was shaped by death. My father's parents came to live with us. And my dad kind of reevaluated life at that point. And he decided that life was too short to be just working for the man. Of course, he wouldn't have called it that way, but and so he went out and because it was a wrongful death. My mother was killed by an at-fault driver in a car accident, and my dad was injured. And there was a settlement, and at the time it was a fair chunk of change. And my father decided that he wasn't going to be working for someone. He was going to forge his own path and start his own business and keep his own hours. Well, what that meant was that he was never home during the week. He lived on his business site. And I was raised by my grandparents for many years. Effectively, my dad was obviously there, but he would come in on weekends, or I'd go see him on weekends. We weren't separated exactly, but at the same time, the day-to-day functional operation of my life was by my grandparents. They fed me, they got me ready for school, they got me to school, they got me home from school. You know, that was what they did. When I was in fifth grade, my grandfather, contracted cancer. And he suffered. It's the only word for it. I can remember he would wake up in the middle of the night moaning in pain. Moaning. That's the only word for it. Kind of like the wailing of a ghost. And eventually, and there was no doubt about the outcome of what was going to happen to him. And he eventually took his own life. He had to go out to an outbuilding, and he had to do it under cover of night because taking your own life is illegal. Think about that. A man suffering immensely. And there is no out legally other than You just ride it out. After that, then my dad had to be closer because my grandmother was beginning to get infirm. She had osteoporosis. She had brittle bones. She couldn't get around as fast. And eventually, by the time I was in, say, 7th grade, 6th to 7th grade, she couldn't do more than use a walker to go from her bed to the bathroom, to her rocking chair, back to the bathroom, or to the bed. 3 things. And she was very slow at it. And she was not exactly suffering, but she was. And she was declining mentally. And she could be very demanding. And she could be very upset, emotional. And I think my dad tried to stay away. She could kind of fend for herself. You know, if you set her up in the day with her tea and her cigarettes and, in a path, she could do her thing, watch her soap operas. But I was the one that got to stay with her and watch her be miserable and have a horrible life. And also, she would wet the floor because she could not get from the chair to the bathroom or the bed from the bathroom to the bathroom fast enough at the speed she would go. And I don't think they'd invented adult diapers by that point. At least I'd never heard of them. Wouldn't have thought of them anyway. And so she would be on the floor. The shag carpet. Dark shag carpet. And I can remember, I can't tell you which is worse. Is it getting up in the morning in your bare feet or your stocking feet and stepping in a soaked puddle of icy cold piss on a shag carpet? Or whether it's coming home and stepping in a warm puddle of shag carpet piss. I don't know which one is more disgusting, but I've experienced them both more than once. I used to bound through the rooms. I would try to leap past the obvious paths that my grandmother would take to avoid the possibility of accidentally stepping in it. There really was nothing you could do except let it dry and smell it. And so I had very mixed emotions about my grandmother by this point in her life. I loved her. I felt sorry for her. I felt really sorry for me. I was young, but there was that selfishness about how awful it was on me. Stepping in piss. I mean, there were other things, but I mean, that was one of them. That was a big one. I know that I felt like she should die. And when she did finally die, I was sad because I loved her and I missed her. But at the same time, I was glad. And I was guilty. Guilty about feeling glad. And there's something about the emotions that go with that. The guilt, the relief, that's relevant to today's story. So with that, let's follow the events, and then I'll be back to talk a little bit more. Sorry, pal. It's okay. There are good days and there are bad days. Today is not a good day. Therefore, it must be a bad day. It's been coming for a while. We've talked about it here. Wednesday night I told you that Taz was whimpering and drooling, which seemed like he was in pain. But that was very late at night. It's like almost midnight. And that led me to believe that the time to call the vet was very close indeed. But I don't know whether this sounds like I'm a monster or what. Obviously, I don't want to cheat him out of his life before it needs be. But at the same time, I want the family to be here so that he'll have his pack around with him when he goes to sleep. But Thursday was going to be a bad day because the floor guys were out. And Chuan had to work very late, like 8 o'clock. But Thursday, he was doing a lot better in the morning. He ate. He wasn't showing any signs of pain again. Still very tired. He's barely eating enough to not be tired all the time. But Thursday night at bedtime, let him out to go to the bathroom and noticed that he had difficulty getting up. His back leg was kind of sliding out from under him when he was trying to get up. But once he was up, he walked out, and later on he walked back in. This morning he has lost all use of his back leg, one of them. So he can barely get up. He hasn't moved in hours. He's sitting over by his water dish. I mean, he's moved a foot or two. Today is the day. I'm at home arranging it and looking after him until the time comes, which will be this evening when everyone's here. I've had a lot of dogs over the years. Had some really good dogs. Never had a better dog than this one. Never. Gone too soon. Oh. We're back. What you don't see yet, anyway, is the final act. I arranged for a vet to come out that specializes in in-home pet euthanasia, which for the animals is a lot less traumatic. But as you can imagine, that's a pretty awful job. And everyone reacts differently to the loss of a beloved pet. I was resigned to it. And as I've mentioned, there's been a lot of it in my life. I didn't even get to my dad. And I'm pretty prosaic about it. I had resolved that it was the best course of action for him. That there were really no good days left ahead. And if there were, they were so few and far between that, the night that he started whimpering, that was the night that I remembered my granddad's moaning from cancer. And that was when it was sealed. I said, I can't wait any longer. The thing is, a lot of people have different beliefs than my family. We don't believe in any kind of higher power, afterlife, God, any of that nonsense. And so, do you need to say things or have... different people have different things that they need to do. And obviously a pet doctor who specializes in this, has to... her job is to accommodate the families. It's to do a technical job. To do it well. And to give comfort to the families. And so she came out and did and performed the same service for my last dog, Kiba, in 2010. But my family was in Taiwan at the time. And so I was the only one here. And it was a pretty no-nonsense affair. I think maybe she was just kind of starting out in the business at the time. I'm not saying she was a new vet, but, in that specialty. Anyway, she would stage it through the steps and give you the points where the dog was going to be going to sleep, and then they would put them down after they were asleep, and how long it would take, and, she kind of had a practiced routine, say goodbye to the dog now, pet him, at this point, and just calm them down as they go to sleep, and etc. And all that, from a technical standpoint, it all went well. James was a mess. James was just absolutely a mess. Chuan was a mess. Michelle was hiding her feelings. She would just leave the room and go plunk under her bed, and you could tell she was upset, but that she wasn't just gonna break down and cry like James was just absolutely tears pouring down his face. Chuan too. For both of them, really, and for Michelle too. Taz was really their only pet that they've had. Kiba was mine, and she was old, and they were really young, and Daz was theirs too. So they did a lot of rigmarole. And I have to say, there's a couple things here that I questioned at the time. I really questioned at the time. And I'm not putting this on the vet. Some of it I'm putting on the vet. I'm not picking on the vet, but some of it was the vet's idea, some of it wasn't. Before we started, I took pictures with Taz and the family, which I'll show them to you here. But, this is people crying with a very sick dog. And then I took this one, which is, I took a selfie with my dog. Even as I was taking this picture, I'm like, is this over the line? Is this tacky? Do I even have a single picture of me with my dog? I don't know. I really don't know. I'd have to go back and look. That might be the only one. I hope not. But I did it. So after he passed on, the vet now has a van. Last time she had like a hatchback or something, but she has a van and she takes them off for cremation. And she actually has a sort of an area in the van where she lays out the pet and she wraps them in a blanket and some feathers and some stuffed animals, and you can have a final viewing. And this is not the sort of thing that I would do. I wouldn't do this with a human. I don't go to funerals. It's a dead body. They're gone. Right? I love them. I feel it. But seeing their body in a casket doesn't do anything for me. So I was kind of like, we don't need this. But James wanted to. So we let her go ahead and do it. And then she said, well, some people feel weird about it. Some people don't. You can take pictures or not. It just doesn't matter. And I thought, wow, I can't believe anybody would take a picture. And but while we were there, don't lose it here. James was reaching out to pet him, so I took a picture. I'm still not sure why. Anyway. I'm going to leave this one right here. And I'll see you in the next episode.